Okay, good evening. We will start off this meeting by going into a closed session. We have a motion to do so, Mr. Clerk.
Yes, the recommendation is that a closed meeting of council be held on October 3rd, 2022 at 6:00 p.m. in accordance with Section 239, subsection 2, Clause D of the Municipal Act 2001 to consider the following. An organization structure and people plan. And again, that's under Section 239, subsection 2, Clause D, the labor relations or employee negotiations.
Thank you. May I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Fisher, seconded by Councillor Gordick. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Wilmot Township Council. I have a motion to reconvene. Mr. Clerk.
The recommendation is that council reconvenes in open session at 7:00 PM.
Sorry. Mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Fanning, seconded by Councillor Gordick. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Before we begin tonight's meeting, let us take a moment to remember Viola Erb. Viola has been a significant contributor to the Wilmot community, and as you all know, alongside her husband Vernon, built Erb Transport, one of the most successful transportation companies in the country. The township was deeply saddened to learn the news of her passing. Viola leaves behind a legacy of generosity, kindness, humility, and community service. She will forever be remembered as a community builder. The loss of Viola will be felt across the township, and our thoughts and prayers are with the entire Erb family. Thank you. I would now ask Councillor Fanning to read the territorial acknowledgement, please.
We have gathered in Wilmot Township on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Mississauga peoples. We also want to acknowledge the importance of the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a peace agreement made between Indigenous nations before the Europeans arrived. It characterizes our collective responsibility to each other and Mother Earth. We should take only what we need, leave enough for others, and keep the dish clean. By acknowledging this covenant and the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, we are reminded of our important connection to this land, where we live, learn, and work together as a community.
Thank you. And there is one addition. If the clerk could read that addition, please, to the agenda.
Yes, one bylaw was added since the original agenda publication date of September 28, 2022 as follows. Bylaw 2022-38, being a bylaw for the Queen Street Municipal Drain, requires third reading.
Thank you. Next is the adoption of the agenda. Clerk could read that recommendation, please.
Yes, the recommendation is that the agenda as presented for Monday, October 3rd, 2022 be adopted.
That is moved by Councillor Fanning, seconded by Councillor Fisher. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none, we go to the minutes from previous meetings. The clerk read the recommendation for the minutes from the previous meetings, please.
Yes, the recommendation is that the minutes of the following meetings be adopted as presented. First of all, the September 26, 2022 regular meeting of council, and secondly, the September 26, 2022 closed meeting of council.
I have a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Gerber, second by Councillor Fanning. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Our next item is a public meeting. I have one item for this evening's public meeting. I now declare the public meeting open. I would like to remind all delegations for this evening of some guidelines for participation. Applicants and agents for the applicants have 10 minutes to speak. All other delegations will be given 7 minutes to speak. We also ask that you leave the meeting once your issue has been addressed. You are then welcome to watch the remainder of the meeting being webcast live via YouTube. If you if you conduct yourself in any of the following manners, it will result in an immediate muting and removal from the meeting. Interrupting counselor, staff, or other delegations, derogatory statements about counselor, staff, or others, hate speech, or defamatory comments. And it is a licensing application. This is the public meeting in respect of licensing application Noble K9 for 549 Trustler Road, Wilmot. Ms. Merritt, can you please introduce the report?
Good evening, and thank you, Mayor Armstrong. Tonight's public meeting is to gather information regarding a dog kennel application that was submitted to the township regarding a possible boarding and training kennel located at 549 Trustler Road. The property is zoned agricultural, which would allow for a kennel to be permitted on it. Under Bylaw 2017-14, any applications for a new kennel shall be subject to circulation within 150 meters of all property borders and a public meeting for the discussion by council as to whether a license shall be granted. This circulation was completed, and at the time of submitting this report, I had received 2 phone calls, 3 email responses, and 1 written letter, which were included in Appendix B of the report. Since this report was published, we have received a petition in opposition with roughly 80 signatures and 2 other detailed emails. These documents will be part of the next report for information, including any other pieces of correspondence I receive. The purpose of tonight's public meeting is just to gather information so I can write a report for a future council meeting so that council can vote on this kennel application per the bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Merritt. Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Merritt of a technical nature? Councillor Hallman.
Thank you, through the mayor. Can you validate for me if this is operating currently without the zoning in place?
To the best of my knowledge, when I have been there, it is not operating. They do bring 1 dog there from time to time, but in my conversations with the applicant, it is not running currently at this location.
Okay, and my next question might be for the Director of Development Services. By visiting the site close by, it appears that there's a roadway or a laneway. I'm just wondering if that's something that is conforming already within that site, or what that process looks like to have that happen with a business.
I'm not sure I understand, through you, Mayor Armstrong, I'm not sure I understand what you mean by conforming. The laneway,
so
the
like
driveway access would be to Trustler Road, which is a regional road entrance. So any access permit granted by the region would be outside of the township's jurisdiction. It's a regional road, so we wouldn't be involved in the laneway access to Trustler.
Gotcha.
I don't know if that's what you're asking or not.
Yes, thank you. So that would have gone through regional staff for the new creation of a laneway.
It wouldn't go through the township staff is what I'm saying. It's not a Township of Wilmot jurisdiction.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. Thank you. That clarifies that for me. Sorry, just making a note. So my next question is that reviewing Wilmot Township's bylaws, I've reached out to some organizations throughout Ontario and some other municipalities that have been facing more kennel applications like this. And my request is for that Wilmot Township staff to review our bylaw, and the Township of Georgina seems to have the most favorable and recognized bylaw that is appreciated and valued. For example, some of the things that ours is missing, that talking to other municipalities, that is they have a mandatory police check with dental permitting, and we don't have that. The other thing was that other municipalities require an HST reporting, as it's very easy for this to be cash operated businesses, and some other municipalities have found that with HST reporting that's helped with improved operations. So my feedback would be that that bylaw would be this bylaw would be reviewed before we consider this any further, and that township staff review in detail the Georgina Township bylaw and connect with their staff on that matter as well.
Counselor Homa, at this point, this meeting has to do with garnering information. I'm sure staff will take under advisement what you're requesting, and when they come back with their report, they can address it at that time.
Thank you.
See no further questions. We have 2 registered delegations. First delegation is Mr. Rowe and the applicant, and Mr. Smith, who has a presentation. Gentlemen, if you are ready.
I believe so. Can you hear me, sir?
I can hear you, Robert.
Thank you very much, sir. Ryan, are you there?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Ryan.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor Armstrong and the respected council members. As you guys know, I'm Ryan Rofe. I'm with Robert Smith here. I'm the owner here at Noble Canine, and I would like to propose a kennel application for the property located at 549 Trussell Road, Wilmot. Next slide, please. Okay, so just to begin with introducing ourselves, combined, Rob and I have an experience of about 30 years of training dogs, loving and caring for them as well. We're in the community, and we just are very, very passionate about the training of the dogs and educating our fellow community members as well on how to do so safely and effectively. You know, we basically do it all from puppies, adult dogs to adult dogs with behavioral issues, personal protection, or police canines as well. Next slide, please. So this is a very rough sketch of the proposed property. When we were doing the sketch, we looked at the bylaws and made sure it was conforming to all of that. As you can see, all the distances are at the minimum for sure from other houses and their dwelling units as well. Next slide, please. So I think, as Ms. Erin Merritt said, the property is zoned agricultural, which would be a permitted use for a kennel. With that being said, I understand that a lot of the neighbors had concerns, and speaking so with a few of them, I think noise was the biggest concern for them, as well as their privacy. Right. So right off the bat, we would like to ensure that our neighbors are able to continually enjoy their properties as they have been for the past few years. Our goal is to not impede on any of that or trouble them with any kind of noise, right? So we've come up with a few solutions instead of a few solutions that can aid in mitigating those problems, right? So as the bylaw requires us to do, no kennel or dog will be located within a minimum of 150 meters or 492 feet of any of the houses in the neighborhood. We are also proposing a berm barrier, which would aid further in the sound, as well as an escape-proof 8-foot high fence with a privacy screen. So any of the traffic coming in and out will not be seen or will not see inside any of the houses or the backyards. There will also be a separate driveway away from the homes on Berkeley Tolman and Mill Drive if Wilmot were to approve so. As well, one of the other concerns that came up was traffic. And understandably so, Trussell is a very, very busy regional road. And I think on Trussell as well, there are a couple of right turn only signs for traffic going left, just because during rush hour, especially, it is almost impossible to turn left on that property. And that is it for our presentation. If there are any questions, we'd be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you. Any questions of a technical nature for the gentleman? Okay, seeing none. Oh, Councillor Fanning.
Sorry for the late on the clicking there. Just one question. You mentioned that you train canines for police forces. Any of our local forces, or can you tell
Non-local at
us?
this point. Yeah,
Sorry?
non-local at this point. Non-local at this point. We deal with a lot of agencies down in the States.
Okay.
If I might, I think one of the largest concerns being traffic noise and what have you, where the current driveway is, where your inspector came in to take a look and spoke with Ryan. It's actually on the opposite side of the property. So this is actually completely opposite to where the location is now for entrance. So again, I think it might be of consideration to come out and take a look at actually what Ryan's proposing here and actually see the property and take into account of where that planning is. It is very far away from the new subdivision that is adjacent to the property. And we know that there's concerns there. We don't want to erect fences or anything like that along their property. We don't want to devalue anybody's property. That's not the goal here. It's about working in synchronism with the public and the properties and answering any concerns so that there are no concerns.
Thank you. Councillor Gordick.
Thank you, through the mayor. I'm sorry, I have a bit of a cold, so excuse my voice. I just wanted to check. I'm looking at the picture that you've got there. Could you explain what the X's mean? I know you said it was a rough drawing. I'm just kind of trying to figure out that. And
Those are trees.
The trees, okay. And okay, so that's just because the shadow. All right. And so there's the X's that are within the blue kind of drawing there. Are they, that's what you're proposing for plantation?
That's right. Just to have an added barrier for sound as well.
So one of my questions is we had a similar situation where a dog kennel suggested that they would put trees in, but the trees that they planted did not take root. And so it continues to be a concern for the neighbors as to the types of trees. And we don't have any bylaw that tells people what kind of trees. So I'd like to know what you're proposing to do there to ensure that the trees actually are noise reduction trees. And what can you do to guarantee, I mean, you can't guarantee that they're going to grow. I mean, that's just part of nature, but what kind of, you know, sound barrier trees or shrubs are you planning on putting in there with the potential to help the neighbors with that noise reduction?
Ryan, are you okay with how if I answer this?
Of course, of course.
All right. When it comes to the planting of trees, in my previous profession, I was a health and safety and environmental manager. I have lots of resources at my fingertips in order to be able to have experts come out, whether they're specific to trees, plantation, or what have you, to you know, have an advantage in making these trees grow and having the proper assessment done. I'm not going to name a tree that we're actually going to grow. I believe that an assessment should be done by a subject matter expert in order to be able to do that. Yeah, there's a cost associated with that. Ryan and I have discussed at length on what those costs look like. We want to do what's best for the community, and doing that, making sure that the trees grow, making sure that they look appropriate as well. Maybe we have some options to be able to come back with when it comes to the type of trees or shrubs that are growing there and how to maintain them as well. So we know exactly what has to take place for that, and I'd be looking for a subject matter expert in order to be able to assist with that.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Because that's, again, it's one of those things like just because, and this isn't on you, it's just part of something that happened in the past, is that not all trees are sound protections. Of course, as they grow taller, then you don't have that noise reduction because the trees are bigger now. So it's more just the idea of sort of following up so that the community is aware that you're actually taking those steps as part of the process, that the shrubs and or trees that you're planting will help to mitigate some of that noise. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely, no problem. Anything that we're unsure of, a subject matter expert, as well as the council, as well as, you know, anybody that the council can lead us to. Maybe there is a subject matter expert within the community that we can assist with giving them some business in order to be able to assist with that. So, you know, we don't have to look outside the community either.
Thank you. Councillor Hallman.
Thank you, through the mayor. Are you familiar with the Town of Georgina's bylaw? on kennels? Either of you? I'm just wondering if you have any comments on that one.
No, I'm not familiar with the Georgina bylaw.
Okay.
I started my dog and canine training career and kenneling career and being a dog enthusiast some time ago, and it was more so in the Niagara region now, to be honest with you.
Okay. And I have another question. Do you have any intentions of breeding at the facility?
Absolutely not.
Okay,
Not at all.
that is also, thank you.
I see no further questions. So our second delegation is Ms. Jan and Mr. Dale Baer.
Hi, can anyone hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead, Jan.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the matter of the application for a dog kennel on the property at 549 Tressler Road. To clarify, we are animal lovers and we've had dogs for decades. Our concerns are not being raised because we don't want dogs. Our concerns are being raised because allowing a kennel in this location is contrary to the best interest of the local residents. I've lived on Milne Drive for 15 years. I know many of the homeowners, and the topic of this kennel has been widely discussed. The feeling is overwhelmingly against the proposed kennel. If granted, this kennel will directly affect many of the property owners in our subdivision. There is a huge residential development underway on the opposite side of Tressler, and a kennel would no doubt affect some of those homes as well. Traffic and noise are two major issues. I'm in receipt of a petition opposing the granting of a kennel license. To date, it has been signed by over 80 people who live on in Manheim Village Estate. There will be more signatures added in the coming weeks. To address the application, I would like to begin with the following information. We have been advised that the proposed kennel application is not in compliance with the bylaws governing kennels. Pursuant to section 8.7 of the bylaw, an application for a kennel license shall be submitted in the proper form, including a detailed site plan. What has been submitted is not a detailed site plan. Indeed, the marked up photo does not have the minimum requirements to even qualify as a site plan, let alone a detailed one. A site plan must, at a minimum, include survey information from an Ontario land surveyor, be scaled and contain sufficient particulars and markers to identify the size and location of the buildings. A Google Earth printout with presumably the applicant's own rough up markings is not a detailed site plan. Further, the measurements provided for on that rough image appear to be understated. The applicant seemingly has not complied with the requirements. The proposed kennel does also not comply with section 8.9 of the bylaw, as it is within 150 meters of an adjacent habitable building. In fact, it is within 150 meters of many adjacent habitable buildings. As noted, the image that the applicant has submitted appears to have understated measurements. An additional issue is that the applicant appears to be only showing measurements from the proposed kennel building to the adjacent house. The restrictions in section 8.9 of the bylaw relates to separation distance for the entire kennel and not just the kennel building. A kennel is more than a kennel building. The kennel is comprised of the kennel building, any pens, runs, or exercise yards. This is apparent from the bylaw, including subsections 8.21b and c of the bylaw that specifically make reference to the kennel building as distinct from the kennel. It also is apparent from subsections 8.21g, which requires every kennel shall be provided with adequately shaded open air runs, properly fenced to maintain control of the dog, and with adequate space to accommodate the breed of dog being housed. This also accords with logic and good sense. A separation distance requirement that does not include the noisy outdoor runs that form part of the kennel would be of little actual benefit. The current proposed location of the kennel is not compliant with the bylaw. Furthermore, the applicant's property appears not to have a location where a kennel that could be proposed that would meet this requirement. In addition, we have very serious concerns about the negative impact on the quality of life in our neighborhood should this license be approved. We feel it will fundamentally change our lives and is incompatible to the residential uses in the immediate area. The location of the proposed kennel is close to the boundary of the parkland behind Milne Drive. People walk their dogs in that area. Children toboggan and sled there in the winter. There's an abundance of wildlife in that space. The noise impact of 20 barking dogs will be significant and will negatively affect how residents will be able to enjoy their property. Many of us purchase homes in this area to enjoy a quieter and more peaceful location. Barking dogs, dogs being boarded, trained, and bike club activities on the property are currently very disruptive, and this would only be magnified if the application is granted. The area on the west side of Trussler Road is completely residential. With the expected hundreds of properties being developed on the east side of the road, the nature of the area is clearly increasingly residential. This is not the place to put a dog kennel. Traffic is ever increasing on Trussler Road, and it is already very difficult at times of the day to enter the roadway safely. Adding more vehicular traffic at this location will only increase the hazards on the roadway. An additional driveway has also been constructed to the property. The driveway enters just behind the properties on Burkle-Toman, and there is much traffic in and out of the driveway, especially on weekends. The driveway is just below the crest of one of the hills on Trussler Road. Vehicles turning left out of that driveway have very limited clear sight lines to the left. The property is zoned agricultural, but this seems to be unrealistic zoning in an area that will ultimately have close to 1,000 homes. It is, in fact, a residential area and will only continue to grow as a residential area. A quick look at the website and Facebook page for Noble Canine will show you that they are offering training for reactive and aggressive dogs. They offer a Sunday morning bike club on the property. This is a neighborhood with many young children. Parents are concerned about their safety. Many of us have pets that we walk in the neighborhood on leash. We do not want unknown and possibly aggressive dogs roaming in our area should they not be held securely. We vehemently oppose the granting of this kennel license. It is completely inappropriate in a residential setting. We know of no other boarding kennel in the area that has so many homes in such close proximity. In fact, the ones we are familiar with are in very rural areas on large parcels of land. We have not had adequate time to consult with legal counsel. In the event that the council is considering any option other than complete rejection of the application, we will be formally retaining legal counsel. Our counsel of choice is currently engaged in a hearing before the Ontario Land Tribunal and unfortunately was unable to process a retainer for us in advance of this meeting on October 3rd. The ability for us to enjoy our homes will be severely and negatively impacted should this application be approved. In closing, we respectfully request that this application be denied. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from council? Councillor Hallman?
Thank you, Jan, for your delegation to council this evening. I made a lot of notes from your presentation. I do want to ask Bylaw one question about that when I'm looking at the map and I'm seeing the comments from Jan with the perimeter measurements from what is in our bylaw, just looking that over quickly, and the map. Can you comment further on that? Where, yeah, can you just comment further on that?
So from where the, sorry, through you, Mayor Armstrong, from where the proposed site is on the map, from the rough measurements I've done, it would meet the 150 meters. However, it is difficult right now as there's no building on site. It's a big empty property right now. So it's difficult to take specific measurements at this time. So if this application were to go forward and the applicants know that a building permit would have to be issued for it, at that time we would make sure all measurements were in compliance of the bylaw before, you know, any digging or building would be occurring.
So thank you for that. My next question is regarding the laneway that's at the top of the map there, as we had heard from that this is a regional engagement. Do you have any communication from the region on that laneway? And if not, can you obtain it?
So I was asked this question late last week, I believe, from one of the residents there. I forwarded the information to the region. I have asked for follow-up and I have not received any to date yet. Okay, once I receive that information, I can have that in the follow-up report that will be coming back to council.
Okay, and then I have another question regarding zoning of where it has the house and the storage barn on the property as well. So where is the proposed way to get from the storage barn to the outdoor facility? How does that look? And then does that conform within the current?
Sorry, I was taking notes at the time. Harold, I don't know if you want to answer it. From the best knowledge, when I was on site with the applicant, where the proposed driveway would be, it would be, I'm sorry, I'm not good at my directions. If I'm standing looking at the home, like I'm standing on Trussler looking at the home, from what I was told, the driveway that will be leading back to the kennel will be on the right-hand side of the property. It won't be on the side closest to the houses in Mannheim.
If I can add to that through you, Mayor Armstrong, that would be on the north side of the property, Councillor Hallman. It's not shown on the sketch that's there. If you see where the red 500 meters is written, that would be the north property line. What Ms. Merritt is referring to the proposed driveway. Again, it's not shown on the sketch, but that would be the zoning of the property as a whole doesn't change. It's the entire property is zone 1 agriculture. It's over 10 acres. And so the provisions of the zoning bylaw apply to the whole property in terms of what the permitted uses are. The kennel licensing bylaw is just a fine tuning of the zoning and creates specific requirements in respect of kennels. So the zoning allows a kennel subject to licensing, and then the licensing bylaw is what puts in place the specific requirements. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but it is the north side from what Ms. Merritt is describing is where the laneway, it's not the current laneway that you were referring to earlier behind the houses.
Okay, thank you. I see Councillor Fenning has a comment, but then I also have a question about something for the clerks. So I guess I'm just going to put myself on mute, leave my hand up, but ask to be called back again for a question for the clerks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fenning, go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Armstrong. Just as the Ms. Bayer was speaking, I pulled up the GIS and did some quick measurements on the region's website there with the measuring tool. The property is roughly 156 meters across total, and the so there, I would definitely want to see a very detailed technical layout of the site before this comes back to us to vote on, because I think it's going to be down to the down to the wire as far as meeting the requirements. So yeah, I'm going to be looking for some much more detailed technical plans when it does come back to council.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Hallman.
Thank you for the mayor. And I see the clerks are popping on screen. As my question at the beginning of the meeting was suggesting about reviewing the bylaw through Georgina, that I am quite concerned about our bylaw and how this looks. Is there any advisement on altering this, or is my recommendation to you to have that reviewed when it comes back satisfactory? Just wonder if there's any formalities that I need to ask before this is called to question.
Yes, through the mayor. The procedure bylaw says that any amendments have to be directly relevant to the recommendation at hand. The recommendations only for it to receive this for information. Might be more appropriate at the future meeting to request that, or through a notice of motion for a future meeting, so that you separate that issue. Because remember, the licensing bylaw is huge. The kennel bar is only one subset. So it would be up to the chair to rule on that.
No, that is very helpful for me, so that I will prepare that for the November 7th meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gordick.
Thank you, through the mayor. The applicants aren't there, but maybe perhaps the director of planning can help with this one, or even Ms. Merritt. The plan shows, as Councillor Fanning has already sort of done a GIS look at through the region, sort of in the middle of the property or in the back end. Is there, in order to make it somewhat compliant with some of the questions that we have, why is the kennel sort of in that area? Why not kind of go back as far as it possibly can to be further away from the residential properties into that, far north west corner, if I'm using my directions correctly, Ms. Fenning? If someone can answer that for me, I'm just curious. And also the other part is, what is the significance of the laneway? Why is that part of the, I must have missed maybe something in the presentation as to what's the concern with the laneway, and just maybe get some clarification on that.
Ms. Merritt, do you wish to answer, or?
Yes, thank you. There's currently a laneway that goes to the house. There's another laneway to the south of the property that backs onto the properties on Burkle-Toman. That laneway, I pulled up a Google map from May of 2021. There was a gate across there, and the laneway appeared to be grassed. That laneway has sometime recently been reopened. The gates have disappeared, and the laneway has been graveled. Currently, according to the residents on Burkle-Toman, on Saturday and Sunday morning, there's quite a lot of traffic in and out of that laneway, which may or may not actually be approved. It may have been a farm laneway that was not approved to be coming out onto Trussell Road. I have been in contact with a regional councillor, and he forwarded my concerns to Bylaws in Wilmot. They have contacted me and told me that they are looking into the matter of this possibly unsanctioned driveway. The issue with that driveway is, aside from what I've already said, is that it comes out onto Trussell Road just before the crest of a hill as you're heading to Ottawa Street. So they're not clear sight lines, definitely, especially turning west. It would be really hazardous for someone who is heading from Ottawa up towards the expressway. And that seems to be, not compliant with how much you would need in clear sight lines to safely enter the driveway, to safely enter the roadway. Turning left from that location would absolutely be hazardous to people who are heading towards the expressway on Trussell Road. Now, according to what we've heard tonight, they're planning to put a third driveway to the north side of the property off of Trussell Road. I suppose that's probably in the region's jurisdiction, but it seems to me with what's going on with that road, the traffic that's coming onto that road, adding a third driveway on that property, exiting and entering Trussell Road, would be, I don't know whether that would be approved or not, but it would seem to me that it would be a lot of driveways entering onto Trussell Road when we already have issues with Trussell Road. And as we all know, with the approximately 800 homes that are coming on stream on the east side of Trussell, it's crazy adding. I mean, it just seems impossible to be adding more traffic to that roadway. But that's all the investigation that I've been able to do on this possibly unsanctioned laneway. But it is really disruptive to the people on Burkle-Toman. There's traffic coming in and out of there all the time, especially on weekends when people are trying to enjoy their backyards.
Okay, thank you. And you just have to know that any access to regional road, the regional staff would have, they would have to go to the region to get that access. So that third access would have to be granted by the region.
Through you, Mayor, just to follow up, I don't know, Ms. Merritt, could you answer the question with regards to the placement of the kennel? Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. As to the placement of the kennel, this is what was proposed to me. When I was speaking with the applicants, I said, you need to propose to me where you want it, where you want your kennel to be, and then we need to make sure that it adheres to the bylaw. So in my talks with them, if it needs to be, pushed back to the northwest corner, thank you for helping me with my directions, then I would assume they'd be for it. But again, we'd have to make sure that there's no other structures around there. But it is all stuff that we can look into, and I would be in touch with the applicants regarding that.
Thank you. Councillor Hallman.
Thank you, through the mayor. Thank you, Councillor Fenning, for that GIS, because I just copied that up too while the chatting was going on, and those numbers are looking like they need some serious investigation, because that it doesn't look like it is possible for compliance at all. So I think that's a really helpful tool for staff to use, because that was helpful for me right now to see that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, see no further questions. And I have to ask the clerk if there's anyone present who wishes to address council on this matter. No. And as a formality, we have to ask for a second and last time as well.
And no, there is nobody else.
Thank you. Seeing none, I will ask the clerk to read the recommendation.
The recommendation is that report ILS 2022-24 be received for information, with this matter returning to a future meeting of council for approval and approval of conditions or rejection of the application.
Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Fenning, seconded by Councillor Fisher. All in favor? Thank you. That is carried. I declare the public meeting closed. Next item is the consent agenda. We will now move into the consent agenda. If members of council have any questions and want to remove an item from the consent agenda, please indicate so now, as we will not take questions on consent items unless the items are requested to be moved to the regular agenda. Yes. Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to read the recommendation, please.
The recommendation is that the recommendations for consent items 11.1, 11.2, and 11.3 all be approved.
Thank you. I have a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Fenning, seconded by Councillor Fisher. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. And go to reports. And Director Jackson, if you are on the line, you'd like to outline your report, please.
Thank you, Mayor Armstrong. Good evening, Mayor and members of council. I'm pleased to present this report this evening as a follow-up to a previous report presented to council, and request your patience as I outline this complex request this evening. Firstly, the report includes 3 recommendations for council's consideration. However, each of them is dependent upon the other in order for both agreements to be included in this report. The first recommendation requests that council accept official ownership of the water wheel located at 84 Bleems Road West in New Hamburg, which is Scott Park. The second recommendation is that council endorse the maintenance agreement between the New Hamburg Board of Trade and the Township of Wilmot for reconstruction and ongoing maintenance of the water wheel attached to the report. And the final recommendation is that council endorse the revised maintenance agreement between the Grand River Conservation Authority and the Township of Wilmot, attached as Appendix B. The recommendation regarding ownership of the water wheel stems back to 1990, when the water wheel was first constructed through a community fundraising effort and provincial government grant. It has been a tourist feature in downtown New Hamburg since construction and is featured in many township promotions as a key landmark. Both the township and the Board of Trade, who led the fundraising effort, contributed $150,000 towards the original project. The Grand River Conservation Authority owns the land on which the water wheel is located and issued a permit for construction of the water wheel jointly to the township and the Board of Trade. Since the construction, the Board of Trade have held a significant stewardship role regarding the water wheel by overseeing, maintaining, and holding insurance on the structure. Despite this, staff were unable to find clear evidence of ownership of the water wheel. Stepping back to 1978, the township entered into an agreement with the GRCA to develop and manage a new conservation area known as the W.J. Scott Conservation Area in New Hamburg, now known as William Scott Park. This agreement outlined the township and GRCA's responsibilities regarding stewardship of the lands, assets constructed on it, and maintenance. This agreement has not been updated since inception, and much of the language is outdated and no longer applicable. In addition, the language had been unofficially applied to other lands in the township, including Kirkpatrick Park and New Dundee Optimus Park. Township staff and the GRCA have been working for some time on updating language to include not only the additional parklands, but also the dry hydrant system used by Chief Larson's fire department for important fire suppression in the New Dundee area, and the road over the New Dundee Dam used by residents and maintained by Mr. Mollenhouse's team. The agreement included in this report this evening provides updated language and roles and responsibilities to capture missing information and provide clarity regarding land uses and maintenance responsibilities. Updating this agreement drew attention to the ownership of the water wheel and triggered a legal review and discussions with the Board of Trade. The Board of Trade initiated a fundraising campaign in 2021 to reconstruct the water wheel, which has reached its end of life. However, without clear ownership, the GRCA is unable to issue a permit for the water wheel to be reconstructed, and we were unable to move forward with finalizing the GRCA land agreement as a result. With the Board of Trade being an organization that does not typically own assets, and with the precedent of the township owning many assets on these GRCA-owned lands, including sports fields, playgrounds, picnic shelters, washrooms, trails, dog park, etc., this report recommends the township officially accept ownership of the water wheel. As an aside, the GRCA mandate does not fit with ownership of a water wheel despite it being on their lands, and hence the township is the logical choice. By adding this to the assets included in the GRCA agreement, the agreement could now be presented to council for consideration. Owning the water wheel would typically place all responsibility for ongoing maintenance and related permits and permissions to reconstruct it on the township. However, in an effort to continue to keep the water wheel as a community-based initiative, a separate agreement with the New Hamburg Board of Trade is included in this report for council consideration. This agreement outlines that although the township would be the owner of the water wheel, it would continue to be maintained by the Board of Trade and funded through public donations, grants, and other sources of funding outside the tax levy. Should council approve this report tonight, the township will be in a position to issue tax receipts for personal donations towards the water wheel reconstruction project. In conclusion, the agreements presented this evening have been reviewed extensively by GRCA and the Board of Trade, including by their legal counsel. Township legal counsel was extensively involved in drafting and revising both agreements as well. Each of the GRCA and the Board of Trade have approved their respective agreements, and a signed copy is in the clerk's possession for the mayor and clerk to authorize should council approve them both this evening. The agreements include a 10-year term and protect the township through insurance, termination, and cross-liability clauses. I would like to reiterate that all three recommendations require approval simultaneously to enact the two agreements. Staff are pleased to bring these agreements and this important report to council this evening, and I'm here as well as Chief Leeson and Mr. Mollenhouse to answer any questions council may have of their respective areas. Thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. Councillor Gordick.
Thank you, through the mayor. I know that there's been the legal part of it, but there's been some conversations in our community with regards to a BIA and replacing the Board of Trade. And so my concern is a BIA becomes part of a municipality's concern versus the Board of Trade. And as those rumors are spreading through the community, I have no idea if they're true or not. And so financially and legally, what position, if we actually don't know that the Board of Trade is going to be a viable organization come the new year? I know that it is an organization that runs from January to December. If there's a new executive that comes in and they make the initiative to become a BIA, where does that put us as a township? And so my concern would be, is there a time frame for this to be done? I know that obviously the agreements have been from 1978, and we would like them to be done as part of our improvement of our documentation. But it would this be something that we could look at? Like, should we be looking at maybe deferring the conversation so that we can have a conversation with the Board of Trade to find out if they're actually going to pursue a BIA and the implications for the township on that from a cost and financial perspective? I'm a bit concerned, especially as that seems to be part of a big conversation that's happening within the downtown community that I've been hearing from some of the businesses. So, and I don't know much about a BIA, so hence my question. What does it put on the responsibility for the taxpayers for them to take ownership of this, and the BIA and the Board of Trade is no longer a viable organization?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there are terms, as I mentioned, in the agreement that would reflect roles and responsibilities with regards to the reconstruction and with respect to what happens if the organization is no longer viable. I don't know that there are definite plans of any kind. I would probably have to lean on our CAO or our Director of Development Services, possibly with respect to what's happening with the BIA. That's a little out of my area. But I can basically say that there was great interest from the Board of Trade to continue their role as the stewards of the water wheel and continue that public facing maintenance of that important asset. So I think that one of the things for consideration is that without approval of these agreements, a permit will not be issued to reconstruct the water wheel. Based on my understanding from the GRCA, they need this in place so that ownership is clear before they can issue a permit. I'm not sure if anybody else wants to add anything to that answer.
Seeing no. Ms. Chambers, you wish to address?
I would just address the question around the BIA. I know that a group of businesses has been investigating that, but there hasn't been anything definitive. So whether they want to continue that process, I believe they're engaging the business community to determine interest at this time. It may be brought forward again next year, but at this point, it's just in an investigation phase.
So just to follow up then, please, through the mayor.
Go ahead.
So I guess what I'm trying to say is for the taxpayers who are maybe not wanting to read the entire document and don't have legal ease, if the New Hamburg Board of Trade then is no longer a viable organization, we as a township will not be left on the hook for the repairs and responsibility. How will that look if we sign this agreement and then in 3 months they decide to become a BIA? Is there a legal component for us to put the responsibility back on that BIA, or is it is it a null contract? Because that's a lot of money to put in a brand new water wheel if we're going to be taking ownership, or does it just come down? And again, that cost comes to us for the demolition of it.
Well, I understand there is an escape clause in there, if I read it correctly. Ms. Chambers?
Yeah, so I understand historically the Board of Trade has paid all of the expenses for the operation and maintenance of the water wheel. The reality is, they have obtained grant funding at this time, and to be able to proceed with this project, we have to clear up the ownership piece, to be able to obtain a permit from GRCA. And this is sort of the legal remedy to doing that. There is a risk, to the BIA or to the Board of Trade no longer being in operation. That exists and has always existed if the Board of Trade would disband. So I think the question before council tonight is, do you want to see this project proceed? The funding is contingent upon sorting out this ownership issue and being able to proceed with this project within the timelines of the grant. We would have to investigate whether if the Board of Trade were to disband, whether we could include these ongoing maintenance costs in the BIA levy and have an agreement to fund that through the BIA levy. That's something that we can look at in the event that the BIA does take over and the Board of Trade is disbanded. So I think that's something that I would want to look at the legislation to see if we could just migrate that to a new agreement and fund that through the BIA levy.
So just again, one more follow-up then. Thank you, Ms. Chambers. I would ask that we do pursue that just to ensure that while we have this contract and the Board of Trade has agreed in principle to continue the maintenance, I think that the Wilmot Township taxpayers deserve to know whether or not they would be on the hook for something that we have actually taken on as not putting them in that position. So I would appreciate a follow-up on that just to ensure that we are protecting our taxpayers. Thank you.
Councillor Fisher.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong, did Ms. Chambers, did you want to respond to that, or you had your hand up?
Sorry, no, that's just a legacy hand.
Okay. Yeah, to Ms. Jackson, we had discussed at an earlier meeting about the Founder Street Parkette and the pedestrian bridge at the cheese factory and Grant River Conservation. I looked through the documentation. I couldn't see anything on that. Has that been rectified?
Through the mayor, we did check the ownership of those lands, and they are all township-owned lands.
Councillor Fenning.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong. Couple things. I know that to create a BIA requires a vote of council. So, the Board of Trade is not going to be able to migrate themselves to a BIA without council's input and being part of that process. So I feel fairly confident that we can have productive conversations if and when that does come about. From my perspective, I see this as a very important clarifying piece to essentially acknowledge and confirm what has been already an ongoing situation. The water wheel has been maintained, as we know, by the Board of Trade. Everybody's kind of believed that, there's responsibility for that from the Board of Trade, and that the township merely operates the park. And this agreement, puts it out in legal terms that is in fact the way it is. So to me, I'm very comfortable with that. I am happy to see this coming forward. I know it's been a long time coming, and so thank you to our director for her work on pushing it. It's taken a bit, and I know everything's gotten delayed well, everything seems to be delayed by everything lately. like you've said, it's not that there's no risk, but that risk exists. Right now, what we have is a water wheel that is not functional, that is in, well, it's not getting any better condition. And we have to do something about it. So with funding that has already been promised from other levels of government, and I understand a reasonably productive conversation about private funds to cover the rest of it, I feel fairly confident that this is not it's not an unreasonable risk to take on the behalf of the township. So for that reason, I'm happy to see this coming forward, and hopeful that we can move it forward. Alternately, I mean, if we were to say, you know what, we don't want to own it, well, we're still stuck with it then. So now what do we do? You know, so to me, this puts things in place, puts process, and in fact actually mitigates a lot more of the financial risk than it adds. So I fully support this.
Thank you, Councillor Hallman.
Thank you, through the mayor. Sorry, just making some notes and looking through here. So if I'm correct, point 14 termination, page 8 and 9 of the document, or page 95 of the entire report, that's the part that addresses the agreement. So just kind of circling back to this, perhaps can staff summarize that, or someone from staff summarize for me what that looks like? So just talking about, for example, if the Board of Trade didn't exist, or if it were switched to a BAA, do staff feel confident in that agreement, that we're protected in that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this particular clause went back and forth a number of times between legal counsel for both parties, just to ensure that the township was fully protected. I don't pretend to be a lawyer, but I can say that our lawyer was confident that the language protected the township to the best of the ability that language can. And always, you know, there are always unanticipated circumstances that could change things. However, in the interest of not having any kind of documentation about ownership, there is, as mentioned earlier, there's already a burden on the township as the party that is responsible for maintaining the lands on behalf of the GRCA. So it is not something that the GRCA is in the business of having, is water wheels. They can't operate them under their current mandate. So if it's not owned by the township, then obviously it becomes a problem that the GRCA would have to resolve. And I feel that their resolution isn't something that the community would really probably prefer. And I'm sure they would prefer not to have to, you know, remove a water wheel, et cetera. But with respect to the termination clause, the lawyers hashed it out very well. As far as I'm concerned, they were pleased with the results.
Okay, another question. So you had commented, Ms. Jackson, on the timeline of the grant. I was kind of quick looking through the document to see, and I could not find something referencing the grant or the timeline of it. Can you share more details with me on that?
Yeah, through the mayor, I apologize for not including anything in my overview of the grant, and I might ask Director of Corporate Services to pop his camera back on for me. But we have, there is a $300,000 grant that was received by the Board of Trade. We are working in the background to assure that that grant is not compromised by this evening's decision. And we received confirmation of that this morning from the ministry. And I don't know, Patrick, if you can comment further, but it was a $300,000. So it's a substantial amount of money.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Armstrong. The grant was provided to the Board of Trade under the Canada Community Revitalization Fund, CCRF. That funding program provides funding towards economic development related projects under the, I think it was under the Main Streets side of things. Having said that, we did have conversations with the ministry in conjunction with the Board of Trade to confirm that the transfer of ownership to the Township of Wilmot would in no way jeopardize the ability for the Board of Trade to secure this funding towards the project. That was a big concern was one of the main concerns with the agreement. We did get that confirmation actually on Friday, and then throughout the weekend I was back and forth with the ministry to make sure everything was clear on that. As far as the timeline for reconstruction, I don't have the grant funding material in front of me because it was a Board of Trade application, but I can confirm expediting the project and moving ahead in a timely manner would obviously ensure that we do get, or the Board of Trade does get the works completed and all reporting submitted to the ministry in a timely fashion. So if an exact date is required, I could follow up to council with that.
Thank you. A follow-up that is helpful, and I'm thinking, with my perception anyway, with how the conversation is going, is that perhaps that's important for us to have that those details. And I guess my brain is now also processing how okay, so let's just play this out. So now we own this. We're working with the Board of Trade. If something were to happen to the Board of Trade, do we, regardless if it's BIA or whatever, is this asset now under ours to repair, fundraise for, comes a taxation responsibility to the taxpayer? Can you just clarify that for me?
Through the mayor, I'm not sure I can actually, predict the outcome of something like that, but it would, as the CAO mentioned earlier, any decision like that with respect to a BIA, et cetera, would have to come back to council. Council would have an opportunity to decide where it goes from there. My understanding, and I haven't reviewed the information about the reconstruction in the recent months, but the information that I received, I believe this is going to be a metal fabrication versus wood, and it should have a significant longevity. I'm not sure if anyone else has information about the structure that they're constructing, but I don't feel there was from what I understand, not a lot of maintenance on the past one until it sort of stopped turning. But any amount of maintenance could fall on the taxpayers in the future as the owners, if the Board of Trade and a follow-up potential BIA or whatever that group looks like, we're no longer available. Having said that, there are always grants available that we can apply for, and certainly fundraising opportunities within the community.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Fanning.
Thank you. I think I'm gonna, well, I was just gonna say that, no matter what we do, it's not going to absolve us of risk with this. Approving it, not approving it, either way, if we don't approve it, we're gonna have to figure out a little bit of a mess, just to put it in plain terms. And if we do approve it, maybe someday we might have an issue if certain things happen. I think it's not reasonable to think that we're saying this will never cost taxpayers anything, but if we don't approve it now, then it's most definitely going to cost taxpayers something, because whether we take it down or the GRCA takes it down, it's all one ratepayer paying those budgets, and that, so that clearly would fall on us. And whereas allowing it to be reconstructed actually, is of benefit to the community and serves as a good draw for tourism, and it's positive for economic development.
Thank you, Councillor Hallman. You have a follow-up?
I can be patient for Ms. Chambers.
Yeah, and I think that is a good summary. We don't want to to sit here as staff and tell you that there's no risk to taking this ownership. If council is going to accept ownership of this, then ultimately you're responsible. This was really the only solution that we investigated that could allow this project to proceed. The Board of Trade has been working on this. They've obtained grant funding, but in order to achieve the permits or to receive the permits, then this piece has to be resolved around the ownership, and the township taking ownership is really the only solution that GRCA is amenable to. So if we don't do that, then the permits won't be granted and this project really cannot proceed. And with that, you will be accepting a certain amount of risk. We tried to mitigate that through creating this agreement with the Board of Trade, and we'll do our best to see that that agreement would survive the transition to a BIA and ensure that those costs would continue to be funded through the BIA levy. That's something that I think we'll have to dig a little deeper into, but I do want to be clear that there is a small amount of risk around this because you will own it. It will be yours.
Thank you. Follow up, Councillor Hallman.
Thank you, through the mayor. So with this and making me reflect on the term that was used for, the ROI for economic development, if we're saying that we link to this, it makes me think of the entire township, about the economic development that we've invested the same amount of that to make other settlement areas thrive and survive, because Baden hasn't received that. New Dundee certainly hasn't received that. Petersburg and St. Agatha certainly haven't received that. So I reflect on the economic development investment that we've made to make all of the businesses survive and thrive in their cores when we're looking at taking on the responsibility for this symbol for New Hamburg.
Thank you, Councillor Gordick.
Thank you, through the mayor. It might be too soon to ask the question, but being that we're talking about the ownership, and I know that the part of the agreement is the Board of Trade is going to be taking on the maintenance and that kind of stuff, the repairs. As this is going to be an asset, will this be part of will this be shown up on any of our capital projects? Like, how is the next steps, or is it too soon to be asking that question? In that, is the money going to be funded through the township so that are we looking at the contracting of the builders of this particular thing? And if so, I'm just kind of curious as to the next steps as to how that's done. And then how are our taxpayers going to know the timeline and follow through of that particular project with it being built?
Through the mayor, to Councillor Gordick, nothing will go through the township. They will be responsible for their own purchasing process to determine who does the construction work. They will be, I think, and Mr. Kelly can correct me if I'm wrong, any funds that are donated will funnel through the township back to, I'm not sure if it'll be to the Board of Trade or, yes, okay, and then the Board of Trade will pay their contractors to do the work. So it will all be managed and controlled. And reminder that they do carry a $5 million liability insurance policy on this structure, and the township is named as additionally insured on that policy. So there are some other checks and balances that we've made sure are in place to protect the township, but we will not be participating in the construction process. Once it's constructed, and you'll see in the agreement and the report that our staff will do a monthly inspection like we do for all of our assets in that park and ensure that we don't identify any hazards or safety concerns. And if we do, those will be communicated to the Board of Trade, who will be responsible for rectifying them within a timely manner. I feel like there's a clause in there about the length of time, 10 days or something like that. So that's all being covered.
Thank you, Councillor Fanning.
Thank you. Sorry, I started looking at the agreement to try and find the specific pieces. But to Councillor Hallman's point about the rest of the community, and you know, that's one of the things that we can't address through this conversation tonight, really. But obviously, ensuring that we do have economic development conversations with other settlement areas within Wilmot Township is absolutely important. But I think that you know, not moving on this tonight doesn't provide anything productive for New Dundee, nor does it provide anything productive for St. Agatha, Baden, or any of the other settlement areas. In fact, not moving on this would be opening us up perhaps to liability for having to deal with the water wheel. So I absolutely respect that we do need to have those conversations with New Dundee, St. Agatha, Baden, and all of the other settlement areas, but don't think that it is directly bearing on this particular project.
Thank you, Councillor Holman.
Thanks for the mayor, to Councillor Fenning. No, absolutely not suggesting what you are implying at all. My comment was simply that we are making an investment to this, and I am drawing attention yet again to the lack of economic focus in the other settlement areas, as this highlights it yet again. So not saying that specifically about this project, but I do not appreciate the direction that I was suggesting that it was pivotable on this one.
Okay, thank you. I see no further questions. So I'll have the clerk read the recommendation, please.
The recommendation is that council accept official ownership of the water wheel located at 84 Bleams Road West in New Hamburg. That council endorse the maintenance agreement between the New Hamburg Board of Trade and the Township of Wilmot for reconstruction and ongoing maintenance of the water wheel, attached as Appendix A to this report. And further, that council endorse the revised maintenance agreement between the Grand River Conservation Authority and the Township of Wilmot, attached as Appendix B to this report.
I have a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Gerber, seconded by Councillor Fisher. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Correspondence, just one letter from Honorable Steve Clark, Minister of Municipal Affairs. Bylaws. And ask the clerk to read the recommendation on the bylaws.
Sorry, the recommendation is that bylaw 2022-38 be read a third time and finally be passed in open council.
Moved by Councillor Gerber and Councillor Fisher, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. There are no notices of motion. We have announcements, and I have a couple here. Start with October is a significant month for several different causes. Throughout this month, everyone is encouraged to discover more about the outstanding achievements of women throughout Canada's history for Women's History Month. Celebrate and talk openly about LGBTQ plus History Month as our community collectively works towards fostering equity, inclusion, diversity, and belonging for all. Learn more about the rich cultural heritage of Canadian Muslims throughout Canadian Islamic History Month. And discover a number of the rich traditions in our community through German History Month. We're all on a journey of continuous learning and growth. We all deserve the same rights, respect, and ability to thrive, and we continue to learn more about each other. October is also the month of Thanksgiving. With the holiday just around the corner, this is a friendly reminder that the Township of Wilmot Administration Complex will be closed on Monday, October 10th, in recognition of the holiday. On behalf of Council, I want to wish everyone a safe and happy Thanksgiving. The municipal election will be taking place from October 15th to October 24th. Have your say, Wilmot. There are even more days and more ways to vote this year. Vote by phone, internet, or in person. Get all the details at wilmot.ca/election. And now ask, do any members of council have announcements? Councillor Fanning?
Well, I challenged you all last week to the Mason Jar Challenge. And I made it 4 days without putting anything in here. But then I ended up with, I was out and running around and ended up with muffin wrapper and a bag of chips. And so I've got something in here after all. It may seem like a silly thing, you know, putting stuff in a jar and once a year and talking about it and making jokes about who can fit their things in the jar. But at the end of the day, talking about what we waste, why we waste, and for me on a personal level, thinking about how, you know, how I'm making choices, it helps me to think about my impact on the planet and my impact on the world around me. And so I think it's a really good good practice to observe our impact and think about the way that that we are choosing to consume. So anybody else have a jar? Anybody? Well, there's still time. You can still sign up for a Mason Jar Challenge with Green Solutions. It's running all through the month of October, and we're only a few days in. So I encourage everybody to give it a try and, you know, just see what you learn about yourself.
Thank you. Well, maybe the only problem is, Councillor Fanning, is that everybody recycled their mason jars. That's a possibility, I suppose. Anyway, Councillor Hallman.
Thanks for the mayor. October is also Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And this past June, our family said goodbye, and my husband and I, to a mother figure who's been in our life since we were young kids, to breast cancer, which inspired us to bring back a fundraiser that was intended before the pandemic, but it kind of lit a fire under us to honor the women in our community who are survivors and the ones that we have lost. So this Friday evening at the Senegatha Community Center at 7 p.m., there's a fundraiser for breast cancer. And one of the things, as it being most notably recognized as a cancer for women, it's also a cancer for men. And people, it's also important to acknowledge that it is a breast cancer, and those impacted who choose not to get regular checkups or miss little things because of assuming that it's a woman's cancer, it can take your life. And so we came up with a fundraiser that's happening this Friday. Everyone is welcome, and it's all the proceeds will be donated through the Terry Fox Foundation, as that funds through the Terry Fox Foundation have the most impact of going directly to cancer research. So please reach out and look at Wilmot Terry Fox for the event details, and hope people in the community will come and take part.
Thank you, Councillor Holman. It's a great message, and sorry for your loss. So that is it. We have a next item is a confirmatory bylaw. The clerk read the recommendation, please.
The recommendation is that the confirmatory bylaw as attached to this agenda be read a first, a second, and third time, and finally passed in open council this date.
Thank you. That is moved by Councillor Gordick, second by Councillor Fanning. All in favor? Thank you. And one last recommendation.
The recommendation that we do now adjourn to meet again at the call of the mayor.
That is moved by Councillor Gordick and second by Councillor Gerber. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Good night, everyone.